Today we're in the shop. We're going to install the Eventuri intake on the G87 here. We are going to use the same intake that Eventuri came out with for the G80 and G82. It is going to go, same S58 engine in the M2 that the M3 and M4 have. So everything should be a direct fit, and we're going to get it installed. I'm going to do an unboxing of the intake. We had this car on the dyno, put out some good numbers, better than expected, as per the norm with BMW. It was 464 horsepower and 412 foot-pounds of torque. We're here going to install the G87 M2 intake from Eventuri. We've got all the parts here laid out. We chose the matte kit for this car. It's a limited run that they did with the matte finish. Also comes with an Eventuri cube. Here under the hood, we're going to remove some pieces so we can get the intake installed. We're going to start off by removing the strut bar from the factory that BMW has on these cars. We're going to have to take these shields off the back in order to get access to the bolts underneath here. We're going to remove the engine cover so we can have access to remove this pipe right here. We're going to remove both of the intake boxes, and then we're going to get access to remove the inlets from the turbos down inside there. Those are going to be probably the hardest part of the job, but they're accessible, and with the right tools, it's not terribly bad. To get the strut bar off, we're going to remove some push pins in order to get these plastic covers off. We're going to use this fork to do so. So now we're going to remove the EDC plug so we can get access to the bolts for the strut tower brace. And then this cover will just pop off. We'll move to the other side and repeat the same process. So we got 4 nuts on each side. Using a 15mm socket, we're going to remove all 4 of them from both sides. Front of the strut bar is held on with a 13mm bolt. We'll go ahead and remove that one too. Now that our hardware is removed, we're ready to remove the 2 pieces of the strut brace. We'll start off with the front one. Pull off the back one as well. Then we can get access to remove the engine cover. The engine cover is just pressed onto the top of the engine, so you just have to pull a little bit and it'll pop right off. So now with just a regular flathead screwdriver, we're going to go ahead and loosen the clamps that hold the ductwork to the intakes. We're going to do both sides. Next up, we're going to use a pry fork just to remove the 2 push pins that are holding the center duct in place. Just gonna pop those off, and then we'll pop right out. So both of the ducts are individually held to the turbo inlets with some locking clips. In order to get those off, a screwdriver or even a long pick is going to be used, and you really just have to apply some pressure on the clip outward just to pop it off. You want to make sure that you don't pull too hard, but once you get the clip loose, the duct will come off. So now with this already loosened, a tug on this guy will allow you to remove this duct completely and set it off to the side. Now that our duct is out, we have access to go ahead and pull this side of the airbox out of the vehicle. It's just going to pull out and come up easily. Once the passenger side of the airbox is removed, you've got a little bit more accessibility to get to this clip right here. We're going to go ahead and pry on it a little bit and pull this out as well. Now we'll go ahead and remove the driver's side airbox. This one also just kind of pulls right out. can be set aside. We're gonna have some OE air intake ductwork on both sides that's gonna have to come out as well. These just pull out. Next, we're gonna remove the stock turbo inlets. For this, I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch extension and a E8 torque socket. The extension that I choose has a flex to it. It can be purchased on Amazon or at your local hardware store, I hope. And this part is likely the hardest part of the job, but we'll get it done. So the rear turbo inlet has 2 bolts holding it on. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. The one on the top is a little easier to see, a little more accessible. The one on the bottom is going to be a little more tough. So once you get this bolt out of the bottom of the inlet, be very careful not to drop it, because that creates quite a nightmare. Now that that's off, and to the side, the inlet will just kind of pull off. So the front turbo inlet has 2 bolts holding it on, both additionally harder to get accessibility to. There's going to be one on the top over here, and then there's going to be one on the bottom down underneath here. There's also a sensor on this inlet that's going to have to be removed. It's got 2 screws that hold it on, and in order to get some access in here, you can fiddle with these hoses a little bit and move them around, but it's definitely doable. Just requires a little bit of persistence, and take it slow. I'm going to remove this hose clamp and slide this hose kind of out of the way to get a little bit more space in here. Once that hose is out of the way, we'll go ahead and remove this nut, or this bolt rather, inside here. It's going to be a little tricky, but like I said, take it easy, a little bit of persistence, and we'll go ahead and get it off. So we took both the bolts holding this turbo inlet off, and now we have to remove the sensor. There's 2 T25 screws that hold the sensor to the inlet itself. We'll go ahead and remove those, and then we can take the sensor off and the turbo inlet out. Okay, so our turbo inlet is loose. Our 2 screws for the sensor are off. I'm going to go ahead and pull back the turbo inlet and then try to remove it from the sensor. And then the turbo inlet will slide out. So we've got our OEM inlet on the right here, the Eventuri on the left. You can see the size difference of the diameter of the opening of the inlet for comparison. We're going to go ahead and take this plate out of the OEM inlet and then insert it into the Eventuri inlet. So the plate just kind of sits inside there. To get it out, you can use a pry tool or a pick, or you can just kind of turn it over, give it a tap, and it'll pop right out. We'll go ahead and install this right into the Eventuri. With the new plate installed inside of there, correct orientation, the inlet is now ready to go back on the car. One thing to note about these new inlets is that the guys over at Eventuri realized that the hardware here is kind of hard to access. Oftentimes you drop it. So what they did is they went ahead and installed in here these floating T30 studs that you're going to go ahead and just really easily be able to bolt back up in there. You're not going to be fiddling around with the hardware that came OEM that you're probably going to end up dropping and spending 4 to 6 hours, sometimes more, searching for in angst while you're throwing tools all around the shop. We'll go ahead and install the front inlet first. I'm just going to try and slide this right past. So now we got the front turbo inlet tightened down. Both the top and bottom bolts are tight. So we'll move on to putting the screws back in for the sensor, and then we can move on from there to the rear turbo inlet. Now we're going to go ahead and install the rear turbo inlet. We're going to place it with the pre-installed bolt on the bottom, and we're going to get that driven in, and then we'll go ahead and put in the top one. So we're using our same Torx 30 with our flexible extension. I'm going to get that in there. We're going to tighten the top bolt for the turbo inlet. Now we're going to go ahead and install the front turbo ductwork, starting with this flexible coupler. We're going to slide this on here, and we're starting on the front one because if you didn't put this one on first, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to get access to tighten it down here after everything is in place over here. So we're going to start with this one first and then go over to the passenger side rear turbo. Next, to install this center duct, we're going to go ahead and place it right in its opening there. You're going to find that this solenoid plug needs to be removed just to get access to lay it down inside there. So we're going to go ahead and pop that off, push it off to the side, and this will fit right down inside. Going to fasten the center duct to the upper tie bar using the clips. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten the clamp that goes to the inlet on the passenger side of the car. We're going to go ahead and place the rest of the Eventuri intake ductwork on the driver's side. And to start with, this guy does not come off. It has to go back in, so I'm just going to slide it back in there. You do retain the factory ductwork over here, so that'll stay.
I'll stop there.
We're going to go ahead and slide this piece in. It'll sit right over this duct in the front, and then it'll slide down and plug in right inside there, like that. Ready to install the driver's side filter housing. This is just going to slide right in. Make sure the coupler seats. And then we're going to put the 2 screws into there, and we're going to tighten it over here, and that'll be it on this side. With the 2 supplied screws, we're going to go ahead and use a Torx 15 bit, and we're going to place these and tighten them right here. So now we've got this section of the intake installed. We're going to make sure that we tighten up all the hardware. We've got the 2 screws here, the 2 clamps here, another 2 clamps over here to the turbo inlet, and lastly we're going to go ahead and plug back in the solenoid. With our 13mm socket, we're going to remove these 2 bolts, and that'll allow us to put the front ductwork in place. Front ductwork is just going to slide right in. Then we'll put our hardware back in. I'm not going to completely tighten it just yet. So the passenger side filter won't really fit that well with the coolant reservoir in the way, so we're going to go ahead and remove a couple bolts and just lift it out of the way so we can make some room to fit the filter down inside there. So in order to move this reservoir out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take out these 2 10mm bolts right here, and then it'll pretty easily be able to make enough room. Before we attempt to put the filter down inside there, we're going to go ahead and slide this coupler on the inlet. I'm going to push it a little bit further, and then I'm going to go ahead and mount both of the clamps down in there. At this point, we're going to go ahead and install the filter. I'm going to slide it down in here. It's going to be a little tight, but it will go in. Next, we're going to tighten the clamps from the intake filter to the turbo inlet. Now that our filter housing is in place, we can go ahead and put back the coolant reservoir. We'll tighten these 2 down. And then we'll go ahead and back up a little bit over here and just make sure that any of the hoses that came out of place go right back to where they are. Just double, triple check everything, and we're looking good. We can go ahead and tighten these up now. Now we can go ahead and put the engine cover back on. It would also be a good time if you're going to do a carbon engine cover, or if you're going to do a IND painted engine cover, to go ahead and swap one of those on. But for this, we were just doing the intake, so we're just going to go ahead and put the stock cover back on. Engine cover's back on. We're going to go ahead and put the strut bar back. Going to start off with the rear section. Place that on. Now we'll place the front section. And we'll go ahead and put all the bolts back. So now we can go ahead and put the covers back on. slide this sensor through. One of our final covers going back on. So we've got the Eventuri intake installed. We also went ahead and installed the Eventuri engine cover. And next up, we're going to do some exhaust bits, some suspension bits, and have some other plans for the car. So if you like what you see, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and thank you.